Hello and welcome back to Get Great at Maths. I'm here to help you pass your maths exam, so hit that like and subscribe button. We're going to look at keywords, key formulas and how to gain top marks. So let's get ready to get great at maths. This is a question on solving a quadratic equation, and we're going to be looking at 4 methods to be able to solve a quadratic, and we're going to go through each one individually to show you how they can all link together to give you the same answer, and it doesn't matter which method you use. In this question here, the keyword is solve. It doesn't state how you've got to solve it, so any of these 4 methods are valid methods. You choose which one you prefer. Now we know the equation is a quadratic equation because we have got a t squared here, and this value of the squared here makes it a quadratic. So any equation involving a squared will be a quadratic. This question is worth 3 marks. And our key facts for this question, first of all, to solve any quadratic, we've got to make sure that our equation is equal to 0. And this equation here is equal to 0, so we're going to make sure that we have got an equation equal to 0. Method 1, we're going to factorise into 2 brackets. So factorising is the most common way of factorising and solving an equation. Means put into brackets. Normally it goes into 2 brackets. Sometimes it goes into 2 brackets with 2 terms rather than 3 terms that I've got here. So I've got 1, 2, 3 terms here. We'll factorise into 2 brackets. If this middle term here is 0 or doesn't exist, and you had 4t squared plus 25, you've got the difference of 2 squares, and it will still go into 2 brackets where 1 is a plus, 1 is a minus, and the values are exactly the same. Now, to be able to factorise into 2 brackets, the first thing we need to think of are 2 numbers that multiply to give 25, and then they're going to add to give minus 20. So they multiply to give the constant, which in this case is 25, and then they're going to add to make the coefficient of the t, in this case is negative 20. Method 2, we're going to look at using the quadratic formula, and you'll be expected to know for the exam that x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You'll be expected to use that formula in the exam, so make sure you learn it, otherwise you wouldn't know to use it. You will get a clue that you might have to use a quadratic formula if the question says give your answer to 1 decimal place. Then you pretty much know you've got to use the quadratic formula. Method 3 is by completing the square. And to be able to complete the square, the coefficient of x squared must be 1. So this is the number in front of the x squared, or in this case t squared. So this has got to be a factor of 1. Then we've got to take the number in the bracket. Okay, so you're going to put the number in the bracket, so you're going to have a t minus and then a number. Whatever that number is going to be half of the coefficient of x, or in this case half the coefficient of t. So we're going to have to take a factor of 4 out. So we're going to end up with t squared minus 5t, and then we've got to halve that negative 5t to get the value in the bracket. So that will be in the bracket, and it'll be half that coefficient. Then this value that you've got in this case will be negative 5 over 2. We're always going to subtract that value squared. So that will be negative 5 squared over 2 squared, which will give me 25 over 4. And then you can work out your answer from there. Method 4 is graphically. So that means draw a diagram to show what is going on, so you can see where the graph crosses the x-axis, or in this case the t-axis along the bottom, and that will show you how to do the question. Press pause, have a go at factorising into 2 brackets first, and then press play when you're ready to hear the answer. So well done guys, we're going to have a go at factorising into 2 brackets, and to start off by doing that, we need to think of the numbers that are going to go in the front of the brackets. Now in this case here, I have got a 4t squared here. We know we're going to have 2 brackets because we've got 3 terms, and the values in front of the brackets could be a 4t and a t, or it could be a 2t and a 2t. It's more likely to be 2t and 2t. Generally, they tend to put the same value at the front, but it's not always the case. So we're going to start off with 2t and 2t. Then we're going to look at 2 numbers. They're going to multiply to give this number here on the end. So we're going to multiply to give 25. And then they're going to add together to give minus 20. Now, from here, you've got to think about it. Do it in pencil. Write down what numbers you think multiply to give 25. So to multiply to give 25, you've basically got 1 and 25, 25 and 1, or 5 and 5. Now, if I use a 25 and a 1 in here, I've got 2 times 25, which is going to give me 50, 1 times 2, which is 2. 25 and 2 do not have a difference of minus 20, so we're not going to be using a 1 and 25, which means we're going to have a 5 and a 5 in the brackets. Now, if I've got a minus 5 here, I've got to make a minus 20, so it has to be a negative in order to be able to get this negative 20. Now, if I've got a negative 5 in here, to make this a plus 25, I also need a negative 5 in the second bracket. So when I expand these brackets out, negative 5 times by the 2t gives me negative 10t, and the 2t times by the negative 5 is going to give me negative 10t. Now, once we've got these values here, we can see that negative 10t take away 10t gives me the minus 20t, which is why it factorises into two brackets as 2t take away 5, 2t take away 5 equals 0. We'll notice that exactly the same values are in both brackets. So we could have written that as 2t take away 5 all squared. From here, we're going to look and see what happens to each of these scenarios to get 0. So we could say that the first bracket is equal to 0 because 0 times by the number in the second bracket has always got to give me an answer of 0. Or a number times by the second bracket, with that is 0. So a number times 0 will also give me 0, which means that the first bracket is 0 or the second bracket is 0. Now these brackets happen to be exactly the same, so we're going to do exactly the same to both of them. Now we want to get rid of this negative 5. So the opposite to negative 5 is plus 5. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So 2t is going to equal 5. From here, I've got to work out the value of t. So this means 2 times t. The opposite to times by 2 is divide. So we're just going to divide both sides by t. This is a calculator paper, so you could type this in on your calculator and you could get 5 divided by 2, which is 2.5. And this will give you your answer that you need to write on the dotted line over here. Note both answers are exactly the same, and this is where your third mark comes from. The first 2 marks come from factorising properly into 2 brackets, and then your third mark comes from getting the answer of t is equal to 5 over 2. So make sure that you know how to factorise into 2 brackets, solve, so put each bracket equal to 0, come down to find your t value, and that will give you 3 marks in the exam. Now this question here doesn't state which one of these 4 methods you have to use. So it's personal preference as to which one of the 4 methods you use. Listen to all 4 of the methods so you can choose which is your favourite method, so you know which one you would choose to do in the exam. Factorising is one you should always try out first, so make sure you know how to factorise first. It is pretty much common to all exam papers, so make sure you know how to factorise. The other ones, sometimes it will state to completing the square, and if it says to 1 decimal place, you're using the quadratic formula. Graphically, sometimes that comes up using the graphical method, but normally it's method 1 to 3. But you can see how all these 4 methods are connected. Method 2 for solving a quadratic equation is using the quadratic formula. Now you can see over on the right hand side we've got the quadratic formula written down. Now you'll be expected to know how to use this formula. Sometimes on the exam paper the quadratic formula is given. Make sure you check your exam board as to find out whether you are given the quadratic formula or not in your exam. Now from here we need to know the values of a, b and c. So these are the values in your quadratic formula. And these literally follow in order from the values. So a is the number in front of t squared, b is the number in front of t, and c is the number on the end. So here's my value of a, b and c. See if you can write down those values for a, b and c. Put the values into the formula and work out your answer. Remember the answer we got earlier was 5 over 2 or 2.5. So that's the answer you're looking at. You could use your calculator to check that you've got the answer correct. So press pause, have a go at answering the question. Remember the values of A are 4, B is negative 20, C is 25. Type it into the formula that is over here. Press play when you're ready to hear the answer to show you how to get the answer of 5 over 2 that we got earlier. Okay, well done guys. Hopefully you've shown that we have got the answer of 5 over 2. So the same answer as we got using method 1. we're going to use an alternative method, which is using the quadratic formula. So as I said earlier, the number in front of t squared is 4, which is a. The number in front of t is the b value, in this case negative 20, and the value on its own is c, which is 25. So we're going to put all these values into the quadratic formula. So the formula says t equals, now remember it is t equals rather than x equals because our equation is in terms of t. So I have t equals minus b, which is minus 20, plus or minus the square root, and remember to put this value in brackets because it's the whole of minus 20 squared, minus 4 times the value of a, which is 4, times by c, which was 25, all divided by 2 times the value of a, which is 4. From here, we can see we have got a minus times a minus. So a minus and a minus become a positive. So I've just got a plus 20 at the front. I've got minus 20 squared underneath the square root. Now minus 20 times minus 20 is going to be a positive value. 20 times 20 is going to give me the same as 2 times 2, which is 4, with adding on 2 zeros. So that's going to be 400. And then I've got 4 times 25 to work out. Now 4 times 25 is 100, times by another 4 gives me 400. So I've got 20 at the front, plus or minus the square root of 400 minus 400, all divided by the value of 2 times 4, which was 8. And this is what t is equal to. Now you can see underneath the square root, I've got 400 take away 400, which gives me 0. So there's no value underneath the square root, which means I've got a repeated root. So my value of t is 20 divided by 8, which is the same as 5 over 2 for your third mark. So your first mark came from putting the values into the quadratic formula. The second mark came from simplifying it, and the third mark came from getting the answer. Remember to use a different colour pen to mark your answer and tick where the marks are awarded for each of the parts of the question, so you know clearly where the marks are awarded. And remember in the exam to write your answer on the dotted line. Now this question is on completing the square. So the third method is probably one of the hardest methods, and often in the question it will say complete the square, or it will say leave your answer in the form x plus a all squared plus b equals 0. So if it says that, you know you've got to complete the square. So in this method, first of all, we've got to make the coefficient of x squared be 1. Then we're always going to take that value that is in front of the x, in this case here, the t term, we're going to halve it. And then we're going to take away that same value squared, and then we're going to leave the plus 25 in this case alone. So to start with, it says make the x squared coefficient 1. So what you need to do is take a factor of 4 outside the front of here. Now you can see that both the first two terms are divisible by 4, so we're only going to take a factor of 4 outside the front of the first two. We're just going to leave the plus 25 as it is. Once we've done that, you'll be able to halve the coefficient in front of the t. Remember, that's what's in the bracket, so t minus that value all squared. Then it's going to be take away that value squared, and then the plus 25 will still remain. From here is a case of rearranging and solving to find the value of t. And remember, the answer should be exactly the same as what we've got on the past two methods of giving you 5 over 2. It doesn't matter which method you use if it doesn't state in the exam which method to use. So here, we're going to look at completing the square. Press pause, have a go at working out the answer, then press play when you're ready to hear the answer. So to start with, we're going to take a factor of 4 outside the front of the first two terms. So 4 times t squared gives me 4t squared, and 4 times negative 5t gives me the negative 20t. Remembering, if I divided both of these terms by 4, I'm left with t squared, and divided negative 20t by 4 leaves me with negative 5t. The plus 25 stays on its own. Remember, I've just used square brackets here to show that this is the big outside area I've just factorised, because I'm going to use curly brackets in a minute on the inside. Now the number I'm used to working with next is the number in front of the t term, so the coefficient of x normally, or in this case coefficient of t. Now that coefficient of t is negative 5, so we've got to halve that value. So half of negative 5 is negative 5 over 2. Now if you plan to go on to do A-level maths, you need to be able to work this in terms of fractions. If you don't plan to do A-level maths, you can work in decimals, and you can just divide the number and then work in decimals if you prefer. Either way, you'll get the same answer. I'm going to show you the slightly more tricky way of using the fractions so you can see clearly where the answer is coming from. So we're going to take this -5 and we're going to halve it to give me -5/2 all squared. Then it's always subtract, and then it's this value that you've just written down here in the bracket. So it's -5/2 all squared. Now remember, when you square negative number, it becomes positive. So we're going to get 5 squared over 2 squared, which is 25/4. So this is my value squared. This is why it's easier to work in fractions, because you could do this on a non-calculator paper, even though it is on the calculator paper. From here, we're just going to multiply the first term and the second term back in by 4. So the 4 times this bracket is 4 lots of t minus 5/2 all squared. And then times with the 25/4 by the 4 just leaves me with a -25. Now these two 25s just cancel, okay, leaving me with 0. From here, I end up with t minus 5/2 all squared is equal to 0, because I just need to get rid of a value at the front here. So that multiplied by 4 that was there, going to divide by 4. So that gives me the t minus 5/2 all squared equals 0, because 0 divided by 4 is 0. From here, I'm going to square root both sides. Square root of 0 is still 0. So I'm going to get t minus 5/2 is equal to 0. So from here, I just need to rearrange and to get t is equal to 5/2. So you can see we get exactly the same answer as we've got previously with the other methods. And it's just an alternative way to get through to the answer. As I said, it doesn't matter in the exam which method you use unless they state specifically. And in this question here, they've just said solve, so it doesn't matter which one of these 4 methods you choose to use. You would get a mark for factorising into taking a factor of 4 outside the front. You get a mark for then simplifying down to this stage here, and then your final mark for comes from getting the 5/2. So make sure you know where your mark's rewarded on the exam. Give yourself a tick as you're marking your answers and you are checking. Okay. Remember, give me a big thumbs up if you're getting these questions correct using multiple methods. So well done. Now the last method is to be actually able to draw it out graphically and show what is happening. So in this case here, if you sketch the graph of 4t squared minus 20t plus 25 equals 0, it would draw you a graph looking like this. Now because we only had one bracket when we factorised, or when we completed the square, we only were getting one solution out every single time. That means that the curve is sitting on the graph. Now this question here, it isn't the easiest to draw the graph, to sketch it, to find the solution, but it is interesting to see that what this 5/2 means in relation to the graph. So because it doesn't have 2 solutions, we literally just sit the graph on the point at 5/2 or 2.5. Now we need to know that this is a happy face graph, okay, because it's a positive value in front of the t squared. If it was a negative in front of a t squared, it would be a sad face and it would come up to 2.5 at the top and go the opposite way around like this. Okay, so make sure you know your graphs. Okay, make sure you know how to draw these. Okay. Now you can clearly see on the question here that this is worth 3 marks. The answer is 2.5. OE means or equivalent, so we've been writing it as 5/2 is exactly the same as using 2.5. You can see there's a method of factorising using the quadratic formula. Any method is valid. It is personal choice as to which one you use. M2 is 2 method marks. M1 is 1 method mark. You choose which method suits you the best. Remember to like and subscribe so we can all get great at maths together. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment below to let me know what you would like to see in my next video. See you next time!